reclaiming hope. And we need hope in these days, reclaiming hope amid global unrest. If you would stand with me this afternoon as I read from the scriptures. This morning's text comes from Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. And it reads as follows. I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me and what he will answer concerning my complaint. Then the Lord answered me and he said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them, but the righteous live by their faith. You may take your seats. When the world around you seems to be crumbling down, how can you find hope? And the hope that you once had is taken from you. How do you get it back? You see, this scenario we face all the time in our personal lives, breakups and divorce, disease and the death of a loved one. You see, these events and issues can shake our world and steal our hope. But today in 2018, it's a little different. We are finding the norms and structures of everyday life shifting in directions we're unfamiliar with. A new posturing and policy by the present administration seems to threaten the lives and livelihoods of sisters and brothers across the country. We've seen global partnerships restructured. We've seen the growing threat of possible nuclear war. And even this last year, we have seen the sad resurgence of ideologies we long assumed were abolished from the mainstream of American society. This and all other things happening across the globe, yes, it is indeed a moment of global unrest. And Reverend Graham, I am touched by your words because we thought the same thing. As we came across the 50th anniversary of the assassination of that great drum major for justice, this is indeed a Kairos moment. It's a divine moment that we have a perfect opportunity to act in. It's a divine season when you put it against the evident injustices across the country. And so, beloved, I came by this morning just to tell you how you can reclaim hope amid global unrest. You see, we find ourselves in the book of Habakkuk. And in this book, we find this prophet and priest. He was a Levite. We find him praying a desperate plea of help unto God. He cries out for rescue from violent and unjust circumstances. He laments throughout this prayer about the violence being done to the righteous. And he complains that the law has become slack and justice never prevails. Turn to your neighbor and say, I think I've heard that somewhere. You see, at this time, the nation of Judah is facing God's judgment upon their nation because of the failing decisions, judgments, and the overall wickedness of their rulers. The Judean king Jehoiakim had been described by rabbinical writers as a godless ruler, a tyrant who committed atrocious sins and crimes. He and the ruling elite of Judah, they bullied the poor, the widow, and the orphan. They did what was wicked in the eyes of God, and so God's judgment was pronounced on Judah. And it came in the form of an invasion by Chaldeans or the Babylonians. You see, Habakkuk's world was shaken and he could find no rest. There was no rest within Judah because of intolerable rulers, and there was no rest outside because of the threatening forces surrounding him. So the first thing we need to do if we're going to reclaim hope when everything around us is shaken, we've got to get into the right position. We've got to get in the right position. You see, Habakkuk's world had been disturbed and his hope had been snatched by impious rulers in troubling situations. But Pastor Young, let me tell you how he responds. He tells us exactly where he goes and what he does. In chapter 2, verse 1, he says, I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will answer concerning my complaint. You see, Habakkuk doesn't know whether God is going to tell him to fight the enemy. He doesn't know whether God is going to tell him to run and hide. He doesn't know what God is going to tell him, but he gets into a position where he can act. And you see, that's what we've got to do to reclaim our hope this morning. We've got to get into the right position to respond to uncertain circumstances. Habakkuk could have went to the temple and prayed. He could have went to the courtyard and sought some help. But instead he goes to the watchport. He goes to the rampart. He goes to the defensive wall. He goes right to the front lines. You see, you got to get in the right position if you're going to respond when it's uncertain. You see, Dr. King, he was born in 1929 in the historic Old Fourth Ward community. And he was all too familiar with being surrounded by uncertain circumstances. His lifetime had seen the blatant injustices of Jim Crow and the segregation that ran rampant throughout the city and the Deep South. It was crippling circumstances that surrounded him and affected all aspects every day. So in 1954, while finishing his doctoral studies at Boston University, he finally accepted this first pastorate at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He knew intimately the conditions of the black community in the Deep South. And I'm certain, like Habakkuk, he cried out to God, how long shall I cry out violence and you will not save? Why do you let me see wrongdoing and look at trouble, but instead of going somewhere safe to hear for God's response? He could have pastored a nice church in suburban Boston where the abuses of segregation and Jim Crow were not to be confronted every day. He could have stayed in the ivory towers of the academy, pontificating from a pulpit that would never be seen. But instead, for his first time pastorate, he went to the front lines. He went to a space where he could act. Dr. King got into the right position. And if we're going to begin to reclaim our hope, beloved, we've got to get in the right position. There are ramparts and watchposts we can set ourselves at right now. If we're ready to stand against the encroaching enemy, we've got to get in the right position. If the threat to the VRA is taking away your hope and get into a position to reclaim it, join the NAACP. If the administration stands towards immigrants and its immigration policy is bothering you in general, get in a position to reclaim your hope. Join the New Sanctuary Coalition. Write your elected officials. There is some place you can be where you can do something about the thing that is attacking you. And once you're in a position to act, we can properly receive God's word and respond accordingly. Verse